Thank you. We'll commence session 2, and we're going to listen to David Horseman now. Let's bring up your presentation entitled Police and Ambulance Early Access to Mental Health Assessment via Telehealth. David, you've got quite a great bio, but yesterday we were introduced to the graduate certificate. Was it a graduate certificate in clinical redesign through the Agency of Clinical Innovation with the University of Tasmania. What a great government initiative to use development and innovation to provide sort of education as well. So you're going to talk about your project, and it's great to have you present with us this afternoon. Our second presentation in this plenary. David, it's a pleasure to welcome you on stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. It is great to be here this afternoon, and it was great to hear Michelle's presentation on the collaboration between ambulance and police. They're probably up for another award for that one. Good luck to them. Today I'm going to present on a little project we're still doing actually. We're in the process of doing, we're 4 months in. It's a collaboration between New South Wales Police, New South Wales Ambulance and Hunter New England Health, or New South Wales Health in general. And we're coming under, as Brendan mentioned, under the premise of a clinical graduate certificate in clinical redesign, which through the ACI, which has been really good for us. So our little project team here, Inspector of Police from Port Stephens Local Area Command, which is near Newcastle. We have our project coordinator, Jay Jones, our project officer, Beth Gow. In the middle there is a senior consumer advocate. So this is the first project team that's come through the ACI that actually has a consumer advocate on the team, and also has someone from outside of health, being police. So we're a bit of a first. Then our executive sponsor from Hunter New England Health, Mental Health, is Leanne Johnson, and then the mug at the back. So essentially what we're doing here is we're trying to take the mental health assessment to the patient rather than the patient to the assessment, or the triage really. So we've given frontline paramedics and police iPads within a distinguished geographical area of Port Stephens, and they're able then to interface. Once they get in touch with their patient, they do a quick assessment to see if they're eligible to go through on this telehealth program, and they'll then link in with a mental health professional at a site in Newcastle called the James Fletcher Hospital, and it's staffed there by the mental health line personnel. So we then have appropriate follow-up for those patients through the community mental health or through their GP, depending on which pathway we follow. So what happened before we started this project is that essentially we get a 000 call, we would go to the patient, we would have no other option really except to take them to hospital. So we would do our initial mental health assessment, and pretty much to determine that yes, they do need some further assistance, but what does that look like? And so we had to take them into hospital in the Port Stephens area where we did this trial. That's a 50-minute drive, or a 50-kilometre drive, sorry. So it takes nearly an hour. And that patient then had to find their own way home if they weren't admitted into the service. So quite a traumatic experience for them. So we thought we could do better. So the case for change that we looked at was, well, we have a reduced lifespan for those patients suffering with mental illness, as we probably mostly know. Probably 25 years less than those without a mental illness. And you can add another 15 years on top of that for those who are Indigenous or Torres Strait Islander. We wanted to reduce their traumatic experience. We wanted to promote care in the home. We know that people do fare better when they're left in their own environment, and no one really wants to go to hospital. So 60% of our patients that were transported to the psychiatric emergency service in Newcastle were not admitted. And that's a big number really. We thought, well, we must be able to do better than that and look at other options rather than taking them in there in the first place. And as I said, they're often not able to get home by themselves as well. So over an 18-month period, ambulance transported 1,765 patients to the psychiatric emergency service, and New South Wales Police assisted with 683 of those. So they're not massive numbers, but they're still significant. And that was through the whole Hunter New England area. So when you look at the state of New South Wales and the broader country in general, we're looking at a lot of patients. So we wanted to look at, first of all, the distance that we need to travel with these people, but the options that we can give them. So that's just a diagrammatic example of how far it is. And every transport we did was essentially 3 hours where that resource is out of the community. So in Nelson Bay, the town that we first started in, there was 2 ambulances during the day and 1 at night. And for police, there was only 1 resource during the day and during the night. So once you take that resource out, it's difficult to backfill them and fill the void, if you like. So 3 hours is a long time, and then if they do get a job in Newcastle, which is a very busy centre, then they'll be out for even longer. So our goal and objectives were to give some access to our frontline paramedics and police to a professional mental health assessment. We wanted to get the right care to the right patient to the right place and in the right time, so delivering on our strategic plans. We wanted to reduce the transportations of those patients within scope, which I'll explain a little bit shortly, by 50% within 6 months. So we're 4 months in and we're actually achieving about 75% at the moment, which is good. And we wanted to keep our services in the area that they were designed for, but look at better options. So we're only looking at adults, so those aged 18 and over, those presenting with mental illness, and we're only dealing with the psychiatric emergency service that was in the Calvary Mater Hospital in Newcastle. So obviously we weren't looking at children or adolescents, and anyone who came under the Mental Health Act was excluded straight away as well. So under Section 20 or 22 through ambulance and police, then they were excluded. And anyone in police custody as well, we needed to take a different avenue with them. Don't expect you to read any of this, but it just gives a bit of a picture of the amount of stakeholders we had across 3 organisations. So, working collaboratively, working with each other's jargon. We've all got our own abbreviations for things. Like our abbreviation for our project, PMIF, is a little bit different and unique in its own. But the amount of stakeholders we had, and we did have to collaborate with all of these people across the 3 organisations, which was one of our risk and issues. Another one was technology failure. We were using 3G, 4G technology to enable us to do those video links into Newcastle. So there's obviously black spots out there, so that was a bit of a problem. And just fear from the frontline users, so the paramedics and the police, of something new. Change is always difficult, but our guys have done it really well. So the project went live on the 3rd of April. We've been going for just over 4 months now, and this we've done 1 more patient since I've done this PowerPoint. So we've got 19 patients that have been triaged and 4 that have been transported to hospital, so leaving 15 in the community. All of them have been followed up by either community mental health or their GP, depending on which pathway we needed to take. And police are doing more than what we are, which isn't unexpected. So out of the 10 iPads that we have out there, we have 123 patients that have been seen by the frontline staff of those patients, mental health patients. And out of those, only 19 have been within scope of what we're looking at. We weren't expecting huge numbers. We actually went a little bit further afield. Instead of just being at Nelson Bay, we moved to 3 other centres as well. Not big centres, but it picked up the numbers a little bit. So all the patients have been followed up. And as I said, we did expect New South Wales Police to be doing more than we did, but it's got a flow-on effect to us, because those patients that they would see, they would normally be calling us to transport them anyway. So it's saving us the work and getting the patient the care they need initially without waiting. And of course, everyone likes to see cost savings. There's probably more cost avoidance. We've extrapolated some data and some kilometre rates and all that sort of thing to see how much has been saved, and we're looking at about $4,000 a patient. So over 19 patients, we're looking at $76,000 in a 4-month period, and you broaden that over the scope of a larger area, then it can be quite beneficial. So we developed a checklist for patients to enter into the program, and the checklist is online, in the true faith of being electronic and technologically advanced. So we wanted to make sure they delivered competence and capacity initially. They had to give consent, and they had to be cooperative as well. Over 18, as we said, and by nil medical issues, I mean that they didn't have to go to an ED for some medical assessment before being taken to the psychiatric emergency service. So we just wanted to make sure that they were clear of any medical issues. And we left, if they were left in the community, then we left a patient information card with them as well as that 48-hour follow-up. and that had some phone numbers on it to call if anything exacerbated, and they always had the option to call 000 back as well. So the new patient journey looks a little something like this. They call 000 now, and we then do our checklist on this patient to see if they can enter into the pilot project, and then they consent to a PMF telehealth triage. If they do that, then we dial up the mental health line staff, and we designate a room or an ID number for them to link in on their telehealth software, and then the patient's triaged. We then have a conversation, the frontline paramedics and police have a conversation with that mental health professional to determine a recommendation. So it is only a recommendation. It's still, the onus is still on those frontline staff that are on scene with the patient to make the final decision. We thought that was very important. We're not going to have someone who's 50 kilometres away making decisions based on what we're seeing at the scene. So it's a recommendation, and the recommendations have been followed for every single one of them so far. So if the recommendation is to go to the hospital, it's going to be, very, probably not foolish, but someone who's making a decision based on their own experience to not take them into hospital, and you'd have to justify that reason. And yeah, if they're left in the community, they're followed up by a community mental health professional as well. So what we've learnt from all of this is consumer engagement has been really important. The senior consumer advocate who's been on our team has been very grounding for all of us. I've learnt so much from her, and she spoke at a mental health forum for ambulance, police and health representatives in Newcastle just a couple of months ago, and she just inspired everyone in the room to actually go out and make more of a difference than what they're already doing. It's been really good. Of course, 3 organisations is difficult to manage, so we organised a weekly huddle between just having one representative from each agency, just to see how things were looking for the week, what our numbers were like, what can we learn from what we've done during the week. Of course, we learned about the clinical redesign methodology, which has been great for me personally. I've really enjoyed that side of it, and we've received really good staff feedback so far. So every interaction we have with the patients, we have the staff do a survey following that to say what they found good, what they found bad, how we can improve the service as well. So it's been positive so far. So our next steps is we'll keep measuring. We've got another 2 months left on this trial. We're looking to extend it. There's conversation at the moment about going a bit more rural, and that's where this really has more implications. So the rural and regional setting is what we're looking at. So obviously need funding to do all that, and the backing of the 3 organisations. We'll continue to build relationships. It's been really good working with the police, as Michelle was saying. Having those collaborations between the emergency services is beneficial to everyone. And of course we butted heads on a few different issues, as we normally would, having sort of alpha personalities in the room, but we all came together at the end. We want to get this to be business as usual at some stage. I think it would be beneficial for our patients, particularly in regional and rural locations across the state, across the country, and further if that's possible. Thank you all for your time.